Good morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals Public Review Session for December 11th, 2017. We'll begin with the special order calendar decision items. Item number 1, 374-71BZ, 20511 Northern Boulevard, Queens.
Okay, they provided photos of the cleaned up site that shows planting, fencing, acoustical screening, bollards, and striping in place. I think the site looks much, much better now. Nothing like lighting a fire under an applicant.
It shouldn't have come to that, though.
No,
Right.
no. My only comment with respect to the photos is that the dumpster photo labeled View 8 shows that the dumpster is already denting and will eventually collapse the fence because they slide the dumpster in and out and it smashes against the fence. So I think we could have a condition on the repair of the dented fence and its reinforcement on the dumpster side with rigid opaque panels. With respect to the operation of the business, they mentioned that the inventory cars are stored in an accessory lot to Belmont Racetrack. So I don't actually understand how they do that. Is there a written agreement that they're allowed to do that? Is that even a legal use of an accessory racetrack? I'm just curious about. I know that they use Belmont for emergency, like apparently during Hurricane Sandy, they used it to store cars that were basically destroyed. So maybe there's some kind of bigger subject there. Do you know something about that?
I've driven by
Yeah.
Belmont, and it is full of new cars.
Yes.
Not just this dealership.
Right.
I mean, like hundreds.
Right, okay.
So I think that all of the dealerships in the area have an
Do
agreement
that.
with
Okay.
Belmont to do that. So I'm not sure about the legality of it, but
Right.
they are all doing it.
Yeah, okay. And it's certainly open and notorious, so it's not like, let's say, various enforcement officials wouldn't be aware of that use.
It would be hard not to.
Okay. We were supposed to have received revised plans that reflect the changes, and we haven't. They absolutely must be submitted today. The cover letter says they will be provided subsequent to hearing. Oh, no. This is the very, very, very last hearing. This is actually closed, and we were going to decide. And if the applicant had not been cooperative, we were going to vote to dismiss for lack of prosecution. So the drawing has to be submitted today. No options. Okay.
Continued hearing items. Item number 2, 634-84BZ, 2501, 2509 Avenue K, Brooklyn.
Okay, we have received proof of notice of hearing to neighbors, but I still don't find proof of notice of hearing to officials. They provided green cards to the extent that they are dated at all. They're dated 2016, so they're the same cards that are attached to proof of service of initial application. So they're obviously not the green cards for notice of hearing. So we've already had a hearing on this, but we still don't have notice of hearing. We also received a revised certification of compliance stating that the build conditions are different than what was approved by BSA. The project was revised to respond to our comments. Waivers sought now are to legalize the existing non-complying with BSA approval front yard, side yards, and for the new enlargement with a lot coverage of 291 square feet more than permitted and 58 parking spaces. The doors opening to the side yards were also eliminated. We were concerned about them having parties on the grass next to residential neighbors. Dense shrubbery, screen landscaping, which I know we talked about the last time, should be shown along the entire perimeter lot lines that are shared with residents. And although the scope of the waivers have been reduced since the last submission, I actually need more information to understand why the small lot coverage waiver is actually needed. The architect needs to come to this hearing and discuss this. They should clarify the dimensions on the plans to be clear that side and front yards of the addition are complying 8 feet and 15 feet, and the location where the existing building side and front yards are non-complying. So they have to be specific on the drawings about where the transition occurs, because it's really very general and not clear at all. We also need them to provide heights of all bulkheads, skylights, etc. on the elevations and sections, and indicate the exterior finish materials on all the elevations, and to add a note to the window elevations indicating that they will not provide direct access to the outdoor areas, and that they are provided with high STC ratings to ensure that sound from events at the synagogue are not heard by neighbors at the property lines or by pedestrians. Any other? We also have an EAS that's still in process. They have to submit the new EAS.
Those were my comments too.
Anybody else?
No.
Item number 3, 3695 BZ, 6575 Woodhaven Boulevard, Queens.
Nothing was submitted on this since October 23rd, and the 9/12 hearing was adjourned, so we're still waiting for a status report on the fire alarm.
New cases, item number 5, 737.
We skipped number 4. Roebling?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Roebling.
Oh, God, sorry about that. Item number 4, 2110 BZ, 2801 Roebling Avenue, AKA 1590 Hutchinson River Parkway, the Bronx.
Okay, neighbors were notified of this hearing, which we asked them specifically to do, and we've received so far no letters of objection. We asked this be done in part because there is a proposal to expand the hours of operation. I just want to make a general note, in future, council and BSA staff should note that notification to neighbors must always provide an option to contact the board in writing by sending a letter to submit, referencing the address and application number. It wasn't clear from the letter that was sent to neighbors whether a copy of our usual form of objection or consent was included in the mailing. So it looked like either they come to the hearing or there's no opportunity to comment, and that's really depriving them of their opportunity to be heard. An acoustical engineer provided a report that indicated readings taken from the menu board sound levels were at or below 45 dBA. No backup was provided for that sound test, or a plan provided to indicate the location of the test meters, so they really do need to provide that, because it was just a little paragraph saying, I went there and the sound levels were low, but we don't know how they did that. You know, did he use I have a sound meter on my iPhone, is that what he used? Okay. And then the cover letter indicated that in-ground planting is being installed, but no photos or amended site plan were provided so far. So that needs to be provided. Others? No?
New cases, item number 5, 73786 BZ, 3304 Amboy Road, Staten Island. It's an extension of term.
So we have proof of notice of hearing to officials and building tenants, and proof of service of initial application to officials. Neighbors are not required to be notified according to our rules for extensions of term. Community Board 3 recommended approval. I just want to make a note to commissioners, because the folders weren't organized properly on this one, that the latest submission is October 3rd. So if you only reviewed the main application folder, you didn't see the latest submission. Photos show a lot of extraneous signage. They need to show signage, the signage complies with the C1 regulations, and remove the extraneous banners. With respect to photos of the landscaping, view 14 shows a fence condition that doesn't match the plans, and shrubs only in one area, not as shown on the plans. So the plans and the reality need to match. Photo 12 also shows a concrete ramp next to the refrigeration area that isn't shown on the plans. And I don't see in the photos the fence that is shown on the plans near the canopied seating area. And on the BSA approved plans, that area was to have separated the back of the house from the seating area with a gate, et cetera, et cetera. Also, they need to provide plans that reflect HVAC equipment, icebox, and dumpster. On the drawings, the landscaping they need to indicate the number, spacing, and type of planting. In reality, they need to remove the debris from the site, such as the old fencing that's shown in photo 13. The site has to be kept clean of debris. They need to provide a dumpster enclosure and information on frequency of trash removal. In the photo, the dumpster was full, so it looks like, and borderline overflowing. So in the 2007 resolution, there was discussion of several modifications to the site that the applicant had agreed to make with respect to curb cut size, illegal signs, compliance with C1 sign regulations, removing chairs along the rear property line, replacing fencing, installing a new curb. The applicant needs to respond to how these were addressed, if and how. And because some of these concerns obviously relate to the neighbors, I'm assuming that the chairs up against the property line and so on related to the neighbors, I think in this case, immediate neighbors need to be notified of the next hearing and specifically be given an opportunity to just send their comments to the board in writing as opposed to having to attend the hearing in person. Any other comments on that? Did anybody see the site?
Yeah, I did. Well, no, I didn't go to the site, I just Googled it. I just had a question. It seems like the parking lot, it's shared by another entity, Luigi's, that's located because they use the same curb cut and the parking space, so just kind of want to understand the delineation of the space and who's responsible for maintaining the parking and curb cut. Is it a shared responsibility, just in terms of that? And do they also have access to the rear? It's pretty open, so anybody can go.
Right.
How is that?
Item number 6, 6296BZ, 200 Madison Avenue, Manhattan.
Okay, we have proof of service of initial application to officials, but no proof of notice of hearing to officials. We obviously need that immediately.
Okay.
Again, this one, just commissioners note that the folders weren't combined. The latest submission is August 28th. So we need massage therapist licenses, because I saw massage rooms in the cellar. The DOB printout shows there were approved applications to install fire alarms and sprinkler systems in 2017, but these weren't signed off. So we need affidavits from the installation inspection companies that the systems are installed and operational in the PCE spaces specifically. Anybody else on that?
Item number 7, 22307BZ, 12 West 57th Street, Manhattan.
Okay, we have proof of service of initial application and proof of notice of hearing to officials. The community board waived its hearing. We received a letter from Rosenberg Estes representing the landlord of 10-14 West 57th Street. They argue that Bliss World registered as an entity in Florida, currently registered as an entity in Florida, is different from the one entered as an entity in Delaware, and therefore somehow they're different entities. We have been advised as well of pending landlord-tenant litigation between the parties. I just want to, with respect to this entity question, the BSA is not an expert in corporation law, nor does BSA involve itself in landlord-tenant disputes. We agree with the applicant PCE operator that a PCE special permit runs with the ownership entity, right, and not with the land. Hence, no landlord authorization is required, and we actually have this on another PCE that's submitted today. The prior grant was to Bliss World LLC, and the current renewal request is for Bliss World LLC, so the renewal application is proper. With respect to the subject application, the substance of it, we have the massage therapist licenses, although some have to be renewed, but they have a lot of massage therapists in this location. And the C of O indicates that the building has sprinklers and fire alarm systems, so I don't think there are open questions. Anybody?
I just had a question of the hours. The hours in the latest resolution, my question is, have they changed in any way?
Okay. Okay,
Good.
thanks.
Item number 8, 16909 BC, 186 St. George Crescent, Bronx.
Okay, what happened? Okay. This one we don't have notice requirement, right? Okay, so BSA council should be advised that according to the tax map, the block number shown on the resolution is incorrect. It should be block 3313, not 3312. I was checking something else and couldn't find it because I was in the wrong tax block. Applicant counsel should submit a copy of the recorded restrictive declaration relating to the 2011 approval and LPC's review of archaeological surveys prior to construction start. That's what I was looking for, the restricted deck. The owner should be alerted to the terms of the restricted deck and comply with it, but otherwise, I didn't have any other issues.
This is the one you didn't have notice.
No, this one doesn't require notice. It's extension of time to
Gotcha.
complete construction of a
Okay.
variance.
Okay.
And it also has a minor modification to the plan to reduce the floor area waiver and the distance between windows and
Oh,
and reduce the as-of-right lot coverage and as-of-right building height.
wait, speak up because I don't think
Oh, sorry. So this is, I just want to, this is an extension of term and a minor modification to the plan to reduce the floor area waiver and the distance between the windows
are
and
separate
left.
Yeah.
those are separate,
Sorry,
yeah.
There's also a request for a letter of substantial compliance
yeah.
that somehow, because the way the database is, everything got mixed in,
Okay.
but it shouldn't have been. I
Okay.
Right,
apologize about
right.
that.
So that
This is only for the
LSC,
extension of time.
right,
Okay.
that's, because there was an LSC filing in the folder, which we weren't really
Okay.
supposed to read because that's not handled
Yeah.
by the full board.
It's
Those
just a
are
confusion because we
minor
have two
modifications.
active
Yeah.
things and
And it got-
Okay.
administratively just got confusing to
But
staff.
actually, I think that the description to this point should be modified here. The description on the calendar should be modified because it, well, actually, no,
No, it's
it's
just describing
correct.
the variance.
It just says what the
Yeah,
variance
that's
is.
all.
It's not asking for any of those things. So, okay, because you were reading the LSC request. And
Okay,
the LSC, just because we're on the record, those are letters of substantial compliance where the requests usually reduce the scope of the waiver.
okay,
Yeah,
Right.
okay.
got it.
Okay.
Appeals calendar, item number 9, decisions 235-15A and 259-15A, 8 Cornell Lane, Queens, GCL.
So, we were provided with a draft restrictive deck that merely says, "The declarant shall maintain the subject premises as illustrated on the BSA approved plans." I don't know why a restrictive deck is necessary if that's all it says, because they have to do that anyway pursuant to the terms of the BSA grant. So, and the plans actually contain no special directions. So what we were trying to do is have the owner take responsibility for maintaining the street frontage in front of their home. Apparently, they attempted to organize a homeowners association that failed. That wouldn't surprise me because you're knocking on the doors of your neighbors and saying, "Hey, want to get married?" But meanwhile, at the very least, we would have some sort of a declaration against on this owner where they have to make sure that the snow is plowed and the street is repaired in front of their building, and they have wide frontage, wider than everybody else's. So I'm not sure how this restrictive declaration got whittled down to being, a declaration for nothing. That's actually a cloud on title that has no impact. So they need to at least have a maintenance line, which they could do very quickly if they want to finish this. They could do this right now and submit. Okay. Any other comments on this one?
Item number 10, 2016-4329A, 2001 Bartow Avenue, the Bronx. Can we open it?
So we received some submissions from DOB and from the appellant, which I don't think added much to the discussion that we've had in the 3 prior hearings. However, because there are a couple of other things that need to be clarified in the record before the board votes, we're not going to be voting on this tomorrow. We're going to reopen for another short submission. So there's 2 points that I want to bring up. The first is, on April 13th, 2016, in connection with his submission on Bartow 1, application 35-15A, appellant submitted Exhibit K to the record, which is titled Hypothetical Alternate Structural Mountings, a distinction without a difference. That's the title. That submission includes drawings to demonstrate that an alternate structural design, which is identical to the structural design now before us in this Bartow 2 appeal, would produce identical results to the structural design in Bartow 1. Given that the board already saw that proposal in Bartow 1, wasn't the Bartow 1 resolution a final determination as to the alternate design? So I would need DOB and the appellant to respond to that question and then respond to this part of the same subject. And didn't appellant answer the question itself by admitting and agreeing with recent statements made by the board in this Bartow 2 case that the 2 sign structures are a distinction without a difference, which is what we talked about at the last hearing and maybe the one before. The other has to do with an interpretation of section 32-662, and the question is how the appellant's monopole design in this appeal in Bartow 2 complies with the language of 32-662. As we have discussed throughout this appeal and the appeal before it, section 32-662 has been in effect in substance since 1940, when city planning stated in its report, billboards and signs not only dominate our business streets, but they take advantage of every opportunity to crowd in upon public places established and maintained by public funds, including civic centers, parks, and especially express highways and bridge approaches. In other words, section 32-662 aims to protect areas around highways from an intrusive overcrowding of advertising signs in order to promote the city's aesthetic values and traffic safety by setting forth distance requirements. And that harkens back to the public policy set forth in 1940 by city planning. As written, section 32-662 states, beyond 200 feet from such arterial, highway, or public park, an advertising sign shall be located at a distance of at least as many linear feet therefrom as there are square feet of surface area on the face of such sign. Where there is only one advertising sign with one sign face, its application of 662 is clear. However, sections 32-662 is less clear in situations where there are multiple faces or multiple advertising signs on the same zoning lot. How does section 32-662 protect the highway in those situations? Section 12-01D of the zoning resolution mandates that, quote, words used in the singular number shall include the plural, and the plural, the singular, unless the context clearly indicates the contrary. So doesn't section 12-01D instruct us to read section 32-662 as requiring that advertising signs be located, quote, "at a distance of at least as many linear feet therefrom as there are square feet of surface area on the faces of such signs." In situations where there is one advertising with multiple faces, isn't that the instruction? And also to read this provision, quote, "at distances of at least as many linear feet therefrom as there are square feet of surface area on the faces of such signs," in situations where there are multiple advertising signs with multiple faces. The appellant again urges that we should consider the LED video screens separate advertising signs with different surface areas, but doesn't section 662 focus more on the distance from the highway? We've already seen that the appellant would have us read all of the words in 662 in the singular and only the singular, but couldn't that result in a situation where there could be an untold square footage of sign faces emitting light towards the highway? That could mean rows of 201 square foot sign faces at a distance 201 linear feet from the highway, followed by rows of 202 square foot signs at a distance of 202 linear feet, and so on. I'd just like to understand how the appellant's reading of 662 protects the highway from the visual clutter and traffic hazards created by sign faces with 16,000 square feet of surface area crowding in on the highway. And reading 662 with its express terms in the singular or plural based on the particular situation would protect the highway from overcrowding more effectively than always reading them in the singular, and would also give clearer direction to DOB about how to respond to such situations. So I'd like both DOB and the appellant to respond to that issue and listen a few times to the tape because that was long. Okay, any other comments on this?
I actually agree with you. I think that with section 1201D informing how we read section 32-662, it does suggest that the maximum total surface area, be it one sign or many signs, should be capped by the linear distance to that sign. But I do think that the appellant, by showing the Bay Plaza Shopping Center sign that was actually multi-permitted by DOB versus the subject sign, were both very similar, and it raises questions for me because I didn't see anything in the surface area definition that actually distinguishes between an advertising sign and an accessory sign when actually calculating the surface area. So that still remains an issue for me that I would love to see explored further.
In terms of calculating surface area between these two different sign types.
Right. Why is it different when the zoning resolution does not suggest that it should be?
So I think though one of the things that is helpful is this 662 only is about arterial signs, right? So it has a very clear public policy purpose, which is to prevent a lot of signs from being close to the arterial and distracting drivers, right? So if you apply that, you don't need, obviously it doesn't apply to accessory signs.
Right, except however, that accessory sign that we're talking about is equidistant from the arterial. As well, and so that's why it stays in my mind, because you call one accessory, you call the other one advertising, but the effect is still the same.
Right.
It's still a huge sign that is almost on top of the highway. It might even be closer to the highway by a few feet than the ones in Bartow.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting question, because I think there was a policy decision that was made about accessory signs that they didn't want to somehow limit businesses. So, right, all the sign regulations are more liberal for the accessory signs than they are for the advertising
And
signs.
I think the Bay Plaza, I'm not sure, but I would like DOB to clarify that. I think this was through a large scale. So there were separate sets of additional rules that were.
Which was through a large
I
scale?
think the Bay Plaza, the entire shopping complex, was approved through a large scale. So I'm not sure if the sign
What does
regulation.
that mean?
It went through a separate special permit hearing at the city planning. So I don't know as part of that,
No, but
if this, some of the sign location or other things.
would be affected by a
Yeah, I
large
don't-
deal? That
yeah, I don't
doesn't
know.
waive sign regulations, yeah.
Again,
But-
I'm just throwing that out
But the
there.
thing is, to the point on that plaza, it's true that all accessory signs with respect to stores, right? The zoning resolution is very clear, each one's treated as a separate zoning lot, so everybody gets to have their sign.
Sign.
So if 500 square feet is the maximum for the zoning lot, then 500 square feet is the maximum
For
for
each establishment.
Each establishment. So if you have 50 businesses there are 50 times 500 signs. So I understand why that exists, but at the same time, it can lead to some kind of a crazy result, which was was certainly not anticipated on the arterial rules, right? Because they don't apply, it doesn't apply to the
Right.
accessory signs. Yeah, might have been an oversight in terms of the way the zoning resolution is written. Okay.
Continued hearing items, item number 11, 26607A, 1602, 1610 Avenue West, Brooklyn.
They're requesting withdrawal, yeah.
Item number 12, 23815A through 24315A, 10204, 08, 12, 16, 20, 24, Dunton Court, Queens.
Okay. The last hearing we had on this was September 26th. The day before, September 25th, we received a submission that the board didn't have time to review. It contained what was a draft, I believe, of the proposed Dunton Court Homeowners Association agreement, although it isn't titled as such. And I'm not sure whether our council has reviewed this, and I don't know that we finally signed off on the language in there. A copy of the Dunton Court Homeowners Association bylaws was also provided, but it doesn't provide for maintenance of the roadway in compliance with DOT standards. And of course, if there was a HOA agreement, it needs to refer to that in the HOA bylaws, otherwise you don't know it exists, right? The submission at that time also included a 36-page title report without cover page or summary. We are trying to determine ownership of Dunton Court, which is an unmapped street. The title company's attorney actually is the one who, in the absence of a court, establishes ownership based on the record. The SA is not going to go through the title report and figure it out for the applicant. The 925 submission also included a set of revised plans that now show 30-foot rear yards behind 3 sets of semi-detached houses with 40 feet between each set, and 8-foot side yards and 18 front yards. So now the project looks like it complies with the zoning resolution, hallelujah. Further, in front of the proposed project, Dunton Court itself has been widened to 30 feet curb to curb, which was what the fire department required, plus a 3-foot wide walkway. I don't think a 3-foot wide walkway is wide enough for disabled access. They need to verify that because there's not a turning, when you're like parking, when you're getting into a car and things like that, you need backup ability on a wheelchair, and it doesn't have that. Also, the street trees that it providing, it did a street tree calculation, the street trees are being shown on the lawns within the private lots. So I don't think that actually qualifies as a street tree, but in addition to which, since they're required, will those then be the HOA property and maintained by the HOA? Because what if I want to tear down the tree? What if I don't like trees? What if I want to plant a bush? Those kinds of things. I don't understand that decision. There's also a lot of, there's these dash lines on the site plans, which are neither zoning lot lines nor tax lot lines. They run sort of along the backs and fronts of the house, almost looks like alignment lines. But they need to be either removed for the plans or labeled, because I don't know what that's telling us. There are elevations also on drawing Z-01 referred to in NGVD and Queens datum. That needs to be converted to NAVD 88. Elevations, though, are correct with NAVD 88. Elevation drawings have NAVD 88. The developer of this new site has to be the one who eliminates the curb that obstructs the access to Dunton Court from 104th Street. That's what makes it look like a country lane in the middle of, Vermont or something, because it looks like it's not accessible. There's a curb in the way. So since they're going to be building a road, they should remove that curb and make it a clear opening. They also need to clarify on the site plan that 102nd Street adjacent to the site is unopened and unimproved. I think that's part of what the confusion was, treating that as a corner lot when you have an unopened roadway. So that should be corrected. And since that submission, the only thing we received, the submission in September, is a letter from council concerning the status of Dunton Court. And it says that Dunton Court is not the subject of a corporation council opinion, and they don't have any ownership information on it. But that seems strange, because if you hire someone to chase ownership, you will find it. Those are my comments. Anybody else on this?
Yeah, on the submitted plans, I see that the lowest floor is used as parking, but still it's like a closed area, so in case of flood, it might give some like forces from the flood, from the hydrostatic on the structure. They provided some vents around the perimeter. I believe that's to make sure that the water gets in, but I'm not sure about the size of these vents, whether it's sufficient to make the water go inside the building at like a reasonable rate to prevent these forces from putting uplift on the building, so this need to be looked at.
Okay, so that kind of thing would be since we're not reviewing the sort of all in detail, the compliances, they should put a note on the plans that the vents that are shown on the drawings will be are subject to DOB review.
Okay.
So, because it's really DOB that will determine the vent size. But it's true that we've been kind of hacking away at the design, because initially they had a project that clearly didn't comply with zoning, and we sent them back to DOB to discuss that with them. So the project changed dramatically from when we first saw it. Okay.
Item number 13, 2016 4296A, 4296A to 4298A. This is Schley Avenue and Clarence Avenue, the Bronx.
Okay. I believe in the cover letter, the applicant is asking us to waive DEP's drainage requirements. We can't do that. At the last hearing, the applicant stated it would work with DEP to address their concerns. They really need to resolve this with DEP. We don't review the drainage question. So, yeah, it's just not, it's really not our domain. Though this is getting closer, I'm still having trouble with the lack of continuity of the sidewalk that's shown on the builder's pavement plan. It requires you take a sharp right turn and then a sharp left turn to stay on the sidewalk. I'm imagining, a blind person walking into the street because they can't figure out what happened to the sidewalk. In addition to which, it's kind of ridiculous to have to do that. It's not like there's a tree in the way or anything like that. And so I don't see why you can't make a gradual transition to the adjoining sidewalk. I think the revised site plan, as opposed to the builder's pavement plan, shows that gradual transition, but because that site plan has so many undifferentiated, unlabeled lines on the drawings, it's really difficult to tell that. They use basically all the same line weights for a lot of different line meanings. And there's no legend for them, they're not labeled, so it's really hard to tell which one's the street and which one's a sewer and all that stuff. Also, there's a 10-foot front yard at the most northerly building's northern corner that's obstructed by the building. So they show the 10-foot front yard, and the building corner actually sits within it. And the front lot lines between lot 7 and 110 don't align, so that requires another jog in the sidewalk. Again, I don't know why. And the lines showing the tax lot or zoning lot subdivisions run all the way to the bed of mapped Schley Street. I don't understand that either. So why are they being shown like that? Does that mean those people own little triangular bits of Schley, which is a map street, an open map street? And the color, they provided a color site plan to discuss the drainage question, but it must be corrupted because it's basically a big yellow blob on top of the entire site. So I think the color didn't work out for them in the PDF form. And just to check, I know they checked because we asked them to the last time, the side yards and all that stuff, but I just wanted to make sure that 23-461A requires an open area of 8 feet between buildings on adjacent zoning lots, and lot 7 looks like it might not have that. So, because it's a 0 lot line building, and the adjacent building is like 6 foot something away, and I'm not sure if it's meeting the criteria for that open area. Any other comments on this?
Good. Zoning calendar decision items, item number 14, 3114BZ, 165 Spencer Street, Brooklyn.
They're still working on their environmental, and they'll adjourn until next year.
Continued hearing items, item number 15, 5602BZ and 317 Day Hill Road, and item number 16, 1-96BZ, 600 McDonald Avenue, Brooklyn.
Right. So this is the ongoing monitoring of the site in connection with a compliance hearing. We have submission of public assembly pre-event inspection reports for September, October, and November, demonstrating an average of 8 events in each month, which seems little to me. I thought there were more, but because sorry?
Could have been
Could have been holidays. Yeah, but it's 8 events in August, September, and November. Oh, September, October, November, so maybe.
They were all, I also noticed that they were all condensed within 2 weeks of each of those months.
Yeah.
So they're like an average of 4 a week for 2 weeks.
Right, yes, right. So I just want to make sure that that's all the events there were, because other prior reports we had, it was like every single week of the month. But granted, there may, as you say, have been holidays. And then those reports are supposed to be submitted to fire department as required by the temporary public assembly permit. Have they been submitted to fire department? There are also letters from the fire alarm and sprinkler inspection companies, which we forwarded to fire department for their review, or if we haven't done so, we need to. So they also provided the reasonable worst-case development scenario dated 7/2/17 and the EAS that were submitted to us on September 12th, and then were amended and submitted to us on 11/22. So it was the revisions of that initial one. There's no revision date on those. They're just submission dates, so it isn't clear to us if those were submitted to city planning or not. This version that we have of the reasonable worst-case scenario makes no mention of the potential for expansion of this building, which we have been informed by the applicant several times. They intend to come back to the BSA for an enlargement of the building, even though that initial application was withdrawn at our direction. It also states, misrepresents other realities that we have learned over the last few years about the site. For example, it misrepresents that the current operation at the school is a commercial facility. It says it's only used for school-related events. It also states that there aren't any parking issues in the neighborhood because everyone walks to the events when we know there's a serious parking problem here. And so to give the benefit of the doubt to the preparers of these two documents, the reasonable worst case and the EAS, those preparers must attend the hearing tomorrow. Any other comments on this one?
Item number 17, 214-14A and 215-14BZ, 50-11, 50-15, 106th Street, and 10310 and 10316 Alstein Avenue, the Bronx, Queens.
Queens. They requested an adjournment.
Item number 18, 263-14BZ, 1601 Oriental Boulevard, Brooklyn.
Okay, the plant, we keep talking about whether this is a full demolition or whether this is an enlargement. It's a variance, so it doesn't need to be an enlargement. But the plans still show retention of above grade, what are called cellar level walls. It becomes a cellar because it's in the floodplain. I don't understand the reason for that. Why are they retaining this? Requested waivers are FAR at 0.95, lot coverage at 42%, open space at 58%. The front yard, 1 foot 1 inches, and the second front yard is compliant at 15 feet, and the other side yard is 4 foot 6, and the other side yard is another side yard at 31 foot 2, which is also compliant. The building is now designed as a split level with a portion of it lifted to 14 foot 6 to bottom of first floor structure, and the balance, which is really the greater portion of the building, lifted to 17 foot 6 to top of first floor structure. The base flood is 11 and the design flood is 13, so the building is still much higher than the minimum required. Part of the cellar is now crawl space at only 5 feet, but the balance is standable space at 7 foot 11, really 8 feet. So usable cellar space is 37 by 19. And as we discussed at the last hearing, that higher than required cellar lifts the building higher than its neighbors. And the second floor has 11 foot high ceilings over the portion with the shallow cellar. So I didn't actually think so that even though they kind of messed around with the interior, there wasn't any impact on the exterior of the building. The height to the roof is still 39 feet above grade. So there's been actually no reduction in the actual final height since we started these hearings in January, although there has been over these various times, the massing at the second floor changed. The letter from the architect states there was a 3 foot reduction in height, but I don't actually understand where that came from, except maybe on the interior. The 14 feet to the peak attic height has been slid to the rear of the building relative to Oriental Boulevard, but because this is a corner lot, you know, the sliding of it doesn't actually reduce the visuals because it just moves it, say, to the middle on the Norfolk facade, and it's right up against the street line because they're asking to reduce the front yard. So I think that elevation still shows the building is massive compared to the neighbors and 6 foot higher than the tallest neighbor on the block. And the block rendering from Oriental especially shows that. So we still didn't get an answer for why they need such a high cellar level. And I also don't know if DOB will agree about the mitigating element analysis, since the majority of the floor plate at the first floor exceeds 10 feet above average curb. They're saying that because they reduced the level of the first floor to 5 feet or something above curb, they no longer have to mitigate, but that's only for a little portion of the building. And DOB, in my experience, looks at what's the majority of the building and determines that that's the actual level. So I'm not sure they're going to get away with that mitigation argument. Any other comments on that?
The statement of facts describe the second side yard as 31 feet 2 inches. I'm sorry, 4 inches. The drawing show 31 2 inches. And also the statement of facts did say that it will decrease from 31 4 inches to 20 feet. So that 20 feet dimension need to be on the plan.
Right, but I don't think it's, often the statement of facts is not following the drawings. We see that a lot,
Yeah.
like they write it and then they don't amend it, or they don't read the whole thing, or, yeah. So we often have this problem with statement of facts don't match the drawings, and the drawings are really the controlling document. So what the drawings say should be in the statement of facts as opposed to the other way around. Okay.
Item number 19, 2015 BC, 461 Area Wax, Brooklyn.
Okay, so my first question is, this site is in flood zone AE elevation 10, NAVD 88, and the first floor of the project is shown at elevation 7.64, which I believe is in NAVD 88, so that would make it below the design flood elevation. Never mind and so, or below the base flood, and they're providing a new cellar. An actual cellar. So I don't even know how to begin with the project, even though we've already been here. So I think what happened is this project came here a very long time ago and then was sort of in delay mode. It was, well, no, actually, it was submitted in February of 2015 and then had this very, very long delay before they responded to our comments. So I suspect that the architect at the time wasn't aware of the new firm maps, and so hasn't updated the drawings to reflect that reality. Either they designed the building as a bathtub, and I don't know about the cellar even, or they have to redesign the building completely.
The existing building has a cellar, does it?
Yeah, but this existing building has a cellar, but you're not allowed to build a new cellar, so they could take advantage of the existing cellar. The other part of it is, the way that this application is phrased, it sounds as if all the waivers are new waivers as opposed to relying on the existing building, right? They don't take into account the fact that there's an existing 3-story masonry building on the shallower half of the site that's built to the side and front lot lines, and probably doesn't provide the required rear yard either, but they provided existing floor plans which you can't read. So, and it also has a cellar. So if you were trying to take advantage, which you would, of the existing non-compliant conditions, you would make an argument that you're in making an enlargement, and we've seen how liberal DOB is about enlargements where there's hardly anything there and it's still an enlargement. Right, an alteration type, one, right, 2, 1, an alt 1, yeah, as opposed to an NB, an alt 1, and so the first part is they should be saying we're maintaining the masonry walls that are existing non-compliant conditions on that side lot line and on the front lot line. And I'm not sure about what's going on in the rear because we don't have plans, so I can't really see how far back that goes into the rear. But at the very least, whatever is the existing, plus the cellar there, and then we don't need to look at whether they should get those extra 2 waivers on that portion, right? So the waiver is really just about continuation of the front lot line waiver. And then the other side, which is a 4-foot yard, so it's not so extreme, and then the various rear yard waivers. The project was revised to reduce the 3rd floor to provide a 40-foot rear yard along one rear lot line and a 17-foot 6 rear yard along the other rear lot line. But again, that's the lot line that has the existing building. You don't necessarily have to reduce it to 17.6 if it's an existing building, right? And it also reduces the floor area as a result to just under 1.96. I believe there's also an error in the statement of facts with respect to the depth of the proposed rear yard. The first and second floors contain within one of the required rear yards, and this again goes to what the depth of the existing building is, but they contain within those rear yards something called a teen activity center and an office that's described, depending on where you read and what you look up, congregation, janitor, bookkeeper, office, and toddler's playroom. And my reaction to that is, really, you're having the toddlers play in a place where the janitor keeps his stuff and the bookkeeper keeps his stuff and the congregation main office, whatever it is? Seriously? So my main question, though, is why those uses can't be located in the cellar or on the third floor where there looks like there's plenty of space to put an office. And also, there is an argument about ADA access and saying they have sort of duplicate services, but that's really not the case. How does a disabled person go to one of the after prayer services events that's in the cellar, or onto the second or third floors for teen events, women's studies, family council, sunrise minyan? And what if the rabbi himself is disabled? We've actually had a number of older rabbis here who thank us when we say, please put in an elevator. So, I don't think that DOB would be okay with any of this, duplicate services argument here. And also, the third floor terrace at the third floor, the terrace at the third floor level is very large in this proposal. How's it going to be used? The cover letter indicates that the third floor rabbi's apartment has been converted to an office, but that's not what the plans show. They show a kitchen and a full bath, so it's obviously still an apartment, just, arose by any other name. There's also something in the cellar called cold storage room. It should be labeled refrigerated trash storage, so we're clear that it needs to actually be a refrigerated room for perishables. We asked them at the last time to show how the site will be landscaped and fenced to protect neighbors at the west and rear from noise. They need to provide calculations to establish that the site is not, they did provide, calculations to establish the site is not in a predominantly built-up area. So that means the as-of-right floor area is 0.75, plus an area under a sloping roof, but they're not designing this with a sloping roof. They also did provide STC ratings and finished materials on the elevations. But I'd like them to show the profile of the neighboring garages along the eastern property line on the elevation, because that elevation is shown as a blank brick wall. So this goes back again, are you retaining that existing wall, which has like one window opening in it? If so, then that's an existing kind of not very attractive condition, but it's an existing condition. But I'm wondering whether that wall can be enlivened to contribute more to the neighborhood, because it's a permanently visible sidewall. And in general, the building sides, which will be visible, are very severe. So I was hoping that something could be done to make it more of a residential character. And then the statement of facts states that the building to the west of the site also has no front yard, in making its argument for front yard waiver. But actually, that's not the case. It does have a front yard. So actually, from my perspective, the argument in favor of no front yard is this existing building that's on the site, and that it's also 3 stories high, this existing building. So, and then, And then the statement of facts also states that the congregation has 200 adults and 100 children, and that peak demand is 275 persons. So these 2 spaces are actually accommodating far more people than the demand, 196 plus 157. So that indicates again to me that there's wiggle room still here. And therefore, you could put something that's in the required rear yard could go into that area unless the required rear yard is already obstructed by an existing building. And the simultaneous use list contradicts the statement in the statement of facts concerning parking. The chart in that list indicates that all spaces in the building will be used simultaneously on high holidays and the Sabbath. But the statement of fact states that the sanctuary and cellar won't ever be used simultaneously due to fixed seating in the sanctuary. So those are contradictory statements that need to be clarified. With respect to the A finding, and this is really not so much for this applicant as it is in general, but this applicant needs to modify some of the statements in their A finding because we're trying to, let's say, correct the thinking in the applicant community about how you apply for not-for-profit variances. So while in this case, the site actually may be unique, it's a shallow, bent, L-shaped form that makes it difficult to build a viable building in conformance with the zoning resolution. But the programmatic needs of the not-for-profit synagogue do not contribute to the uniqueness. The site itself is this shallow L shape. That's unique, but the programmatic needs are not the uniqueness finding. Had this not been a house of worship that's able to rely on the Cornell deference doctrine, the applicant would have had to prove that the unique characteristics of the lot prevent the not-for-profit from constructing a building in conformance with the zoning resolution that meets the not-for-profit's programmatic needs. So that's not a uniqueness finding, that's just saying that the unique lot prevents us from building a large enough prayer space, but it's unique, right?
And the programmatic needs description should be more of an E finding.
About, say again?
It should be more like an E finding.
E finding, yeah.
For sort of minimal relief.
Correct.
necessary.
It would make it easier for applicants to understand if they would move their programmatic needs analysis out of the A and put it, for example, in the E finding. It's just that everyone's conflating the programmatic needs into uniqueness. It isn't. And when the board's resolutions say in conjunction with the programmatic needs, they don't mean that programmatic needs is uniqueness, that it's like in, let's say, inexact wording. It just means that we viewed the programmatic needs and we see that your programmatic needs are hampered by this uniquely shaped lot. That's the issue. And the lot has to be uniquely shaped in a way that is detrimental. It can't just have like an 87-degree angle at the corner, right? That's not it. That doesn't hamper development. Lots of sites have 87-degree angles. Okay, so the statement of facts in this case needs to be amended because it becomes part of the record and people search and then they use that kind of thing as their model, and that's not a correct model. And then finally, for parking events, they said there's valet parking service. I'd just like to understand where will they be parking? And is there adequate parking in the area? They didn't address that. And then just a note from staff, the applicant provided a new DOB objection form that omits the parking waiver objection that was on the originally submitted DOB objection form. And the written submitted materials continue to state that a parking waiver is still required, which it is. So also the narrative about the DOB objection sheet waivers in the statement of facts on page 6 is from the old DOB objection form and doesn't reflect the updated objection form. So something has to be changed in order to reflect the actual project. Sorry to go on. Anybody else?
No, those were, I did want some clarification on the parking and what the on-street parking condition is and how the valet service is going to address more of the operational information regarding that.
I also wanted to know about the roof terrace and what it will be used for and how many people will contain.
And then for environmental review, they were still missing the WRP form, the Jamaica Bay Watershed form. And then they also need to provide a historic and natural resource section narrative. And the applicant was emailed that, but just so you guys.
They were advised of that?
They were advised of that in writing, so we just want to let you know the status of the environmental review.
So WRP and LPC.
WRP and the Jamaica Bay consistency form.
But didn't you also say the archaeological? No?
Well, it's missing the historic and natural resources narrative.
Oh. The chapter.
Those are two separate.
Yeah. Right.
Sorry.
And then, yeah.
Okay.
Go on.
Yeah.
Item number 20, 2016-4138BZ, 32327 Avenue of the Americas, Manhattan.
Okay. Okay, Community Board 2 provided a letter on November 6th endorsing pursuit of Scheme 4C in favor of residential uses on the floors above the first floor on Cornelia Street, consistent with what is elsewhere on the block. We also have 3 additional letters opposing the commercial use on Cornelia, including one letter from Central Village Block Association. Scheme 6, which is the entire site as the theater version, was revised to dramatically improve circulation on the second floor by removing one theater and building over the smaller Parish House building facing 6th Avenue to provide a third theater at that floor with reasonable circulation. We weren't provided with all of the sections that are shown as having been cut on the plans. We also had requested at the last hearing a combination of Scheme 4C and 5. This is the theater residential version with construction on top of the entirety of the existing theater on 6th Avenue, lobby at grade, and theater in the cellar on Cornelia with 4 1,120 square foot apartments above. As discussed at the last hearing, the layout of the new third floor that is over the existing theater is very spacious compared to the third floor in Scheme 6 and may be adding to the costs. And so that wasn't modified as far as I could tell. There's also a combination use 4D, that's a new one. In that one, theaters are awkwardly shaped and sit directly beneath and adjacent to tiny apartments. The cover letter, however, states that 4D is the only financially feasible option, even though it does show some amount of loss, $400,000 loss. I didn't really understand in terms of the difference in costs on these 3 schemes, why 4D would have been one that's viable, given that Scheme 6 has fewer floors on Cornelia and no overbuild of the main theater, or that 4C has much better apartments with 2 times the rentable area. And I note that Scheme 4C and 4D are $1 million apart in hard costs, and some trimming of those and of the schemes and the cost analysis could bring a much better scheme, I think, which is 4C, closer to being feasible. With respect to the construction costs, where the tenant is a theater, what I didn't understand what's assumed will be the tenant's expenses versus the landlord's build-out expenses. Would the landlord in a theater contract really pay to install the seating, acoustical panels, special HVAC and theater electrical and sound system, PA system, concession booth, carpeting, etc., doesn't the T have its own costs that should be taken out of this? I mean, a plain vanilla box or a plain vanilla theater box, I understand, but not one where all the specialties, which amount to something like $2.5 million, are included in the landlord's costs, and I don't understand that. Next. Let's just stay on the, I guess, the A and the B finding, and then move to the other findings, so, right,
So
okay.
should I
Yeah,
go
so maybe,
now?
yeah, otherwise it's confusing.
Oh, okay, so I reviewed the financials, and I was happy to see that they changed the comparables for the residential rentals and are now using comparables that are more similar to what is being presented as the proposed, in that they're in a more of the same geographical location. However, they are adjusted downward for having superior amenities, and I'm going to accept those adjustments because the buildings that they're using are pretty high-end, multi-dwelling buildings that have lots of amenities in them or have superior views because they're taller, they're closer to the river. I agree with you about the construction costs for the theater and determining what portion of those costs are actually paid by the tenant. If you look at theater income comparables, specifically the Landmark Theater deal, there is a tenant letter that has to do with giving a discount on rent for the build-out that the tenant is actually going to do. And so that actually is depressing the income that's used in the analysis that we have before us. And so the question here is, if there would be a tenant letter, what costs are covered by that tenant letter? And if those costs are covered by the tenant letter, then they need to come out of the total construction costs that are assumed by the landlord. And because we're using income that's basically informed by those comparables that have a tenant letter, we need to make sure that those construction costs have been removed from the construction costs given to us here that are actually going to be paid by the landlord or owner. I'm going to leave
I just have a question about that. So it's like a two-part question. The first is, if you have a build-out by the landlord, so then that increases the rent or decreases the rent?
If the landlord were to do the entire build-out,
That increases the
then
rent.
it should increase the rent.
Right.
But if the landlord is going to issue a tenant letter or a discount to the tenant by saying,
Right.
you do the build-out yourself, and we'll give you a little money off of the rent because you're doing the build-out, well, then the rent is lower.
Right. But so my initial comment was different. So if the tenant says, I'm the one who really understands how theaters are built, so I'm going to do the build out, right? And so in which case they get a discount on the rent because the landlord would have provided at least a plain vanilla box or a plain vanilla theater box. That's one. But the other part of it is that the landlord, unless I don't understand how landlords work, is not going to include in the discount things that are very, very tenant-specific fixtures, like, for example, seating or special types of lighting systems or sound systems or all of that, because that would never have been included in the plain vanilla theater box.
Well, I actually
Yeah.
not sure the answer
Okay.
to that, and I guess that's why I'm asking the question, to
Okay.
find out what it actually covers. I really am not sure
Okay.
what extent the tenant letter covers in terms of the discount.
I believe you can look at what you're comparing to and see that you're comparing apple to apple. If the treatment from the comparables, from the landlord of the comparables to the tenant was like, okay, I'm gonna put these very special pictures, and
We don't
you-
have that information.
You don't have it?
No, we don't have
Okay.
that. We just basically have the income of the comparables, and it also says there's a tenant letter of, I think, $10 a square foot for one of the comparables. But there is no large narrative as to what that actually covers.
$10 a square foot can't cover much.
I don't think this
Yeah.
is the only cost item that's problematic. I did look at the three options, 4C, 4D, and 6 over the weekend. Actually, I spent the entire weekend.
Should I finish my
Yeah,
comments first?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Let her,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I thought you were done.
Yeah.
No. And that actually leads us to the last issue that's been debated about, and that's the cap rate justification. The applicant actually gave us a couple of articles on the theater business that surveyed cap rates from different sales between 2008 and 2010, and also gave us an article about theater cap rates that occur somewhere around 2013. And the result of those articles is that there are cap rates that have been observed in the industry of between 6.5 and like 9. And it actually gives us an example of one of them that's in an urban area that's on the low side, which is 6.5, although it doesn't specify which urban area. I would assume that, taken from that, that the lower cap rates would be applied to theaters in areas such as New York City. That being said, the opposition gave us information about cap rates that basically said that the cap rates that should be used here should be lower, around 4.5, and they should be based on retail cap rates. So, you know, I'm not convinced by either of the conversations about this, the applicant or the opposition. I think you could borrow from both arguments. And so I would say that I don't think that this is plain vanilla retail. I do think that there is more risk associated with a specialty project than there is with plain vanilla retail. So I'm not going to agree that the cap rate should be as low as retail cap rates. However, the applicant's argument talks about risk and talks about the fact that there is more risk to an unproven investment versus an ongoing concern. And so therefore, the cap rates here should be on the higher side because this is a new investment. That I disagree with. I think that this is an existing business. It's considering an enlargement, but it is an existing business. And the owners and investors are aware of the existing income stream and the potential given the extra square footage. And so therefore, I don't think this is as risky as they say. So that, in conjunction with the two articles that suggest that the lowest cap rate should be a 6.5 for a theater project, leads me to believe that the cap rates here should be adjusted downward to be equal to that. So right now, the cap rates for the theater are a 7.0 for the pure theater, and for the mixed use with residential, which has less risk and should have a lower cap rate at 6.5. I think that the cap rates for the pure theater should at least be in line with the article and should be at a 6.5 maximum. And then the mixed use should have a lower cap rate than that because it also has residential in it, which is a more secure investment with upside potential. And so if you were to adjust the cap rates downward based on that for all four schemes, Scheme 4D, new Scheme 6 and old Scheme 6 work. Scheme 4C is borderline. There's about a delta of $350,000. And actually, if you were to increase net operating income by as little as $35,000, that actually becomes feasible. And when we're talking about net operating incomes of between $1.6 and $1.8 million, $35,000 is a mere rounding error. And so therefore, I also believe that 4C works. And that's without even talking about the legitimacy of the hard construction costs claimed. And with that, I will let you continue.
Thank you. So option 4C, it sounds like it's about 30% less in square footage. Option 6, which is the other extreme, is like 32,000 square feet. Option C is 4C is like about slightly above 30,000. Although the cost for option 6 is about 30% more than option C. So that's why I was like curious to look at the cost items and see how can we get such increase in cost with decrease in the square footage, which is weird for me. In the beginning, the explanation that I was thinking about was the structural system for that special truss that need to span one of the theaters. However, when I looked at option C, I believe theater number 2 on the second floor, it's gonna need very similar structural system to theater number 2 on option C. So more or less, we could have the same structural system, the same complicated structural system on option 6 as option 4C. So it shouldn't be that much change in cost or even increase in cost with the decrease in the square footage or the built over area. I looked at some items on the foundation. For example, we have like 300,000 increase for option 6 from 4C. We need to understand how did we get there. For the facade, for the exterior facade, we have like 400,000 increase. I'm not sure why the facade cost should increase for option 6 over 4C. My understanding, again, it's just the structural system for that complicated truss over theater number 2. Same thing for the drywall, about 400,000 increase. Plumbing, 225. HVAC, about 400,000 increase. Even the electric is about 200,000. So we need explanations for why these items went up on option 6 over option 4C. We need to get geotech because I see that pile foundation and shallow foundation are used. So I want to see this in the geotech recommendations from the geotechnical engineer. I'm not sure where the mat foundation is used. I've seen in the cost estimate, I have seen some mat slab or mat foundation elements. I don't know for a 4-story building, do we really need mat foundation on a building like this? So we need to take a look at that. We need to take a look at the structural design for that said complicated truss again, and whether it's used on 4C and 6, so we can check the validity of the cost. There are some costs items that were listed like pile testing. My understanding, they are using caisson piles, which is rock socketed. If they are using such type of pile, there is no pile load testing required by the building code. They could get waiver for that. They should exclude that kind of cost.
What kind of testing is it?
It's a pile load testing. It's 30 grand, but still, if it's not needed, it shouldn't be there. I've seen some variations from option to option in the underpinning cost and the SOE. I'm not sure why, so we need to, if they have copies of the SOE drawings and the underpinning, I would like to take a look at them. The unit cost for some items, like the excavation and disposal, was like $75 per cubic yard. We want to know if there is any environmental issue with the site, so it leads to that high excavation and disposal premium. Also, the concrete infill, usually the price for this is significantly less than what they use. They are using $15 per square foot. This is way too much than what I used to. Pile caps, $1,500. Again, this is high. Grade beams, $1,800 per cubic yard. This is high again. And for the structural steel, I have seen two types of structural steel categories, or two categories. One of them, the unit price for it is $7,500 per ton. The other one is just $4,500 per ton. So we want to understand why the cost is different while it's the same structural steel.
So just to be clear, so sometimes it's option 6 that has higher costs than option 4C?
Option 6 has usually lower cost.
Lower cost?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's option 6, when you were talking about the facade is greater in option 4C than in 6?
Yes.
Okay.
About 400,000. The piling, the excavation, the superstructure, the structural steel, the sheet metal and concrete filling, the exterior facade, the drywall, the plumbing, the HVAC, the electric, all these items are higher in option 4C than option 6. And the only, like I said, based on my understanding, the only item that I could understand is the structural steel, because they are talking about this special truss. But even when I looked at the plans, I have seen theater number 2 in option 6, very similar to theater number 2 in option 4C. So it sounds like it should be the same structural system, the same special truss in both options. So why the cost is that too much different? We would like to understand that.
Okay, so the short of it is we really need the cost estimator here. And then one of the things that they said in the statement is that they hired a structural engineer who came to the conclusion that it would be expensive to build over the existing theater, but they gave us no information about that. It was just a statement, right?
Yes,
So we need
we need the structural drawings to look at, and we need the excavation support, because like I said, excavation support is different from 6 to 4C to 4D. Why? So we want to understand these cost items. And the only way to understand them is to get the drawings for him and look at them.
Okay, thanks. Okay, anything else left over on the B department? Okay, do you want to talk about?
Can I carry on from
Yeah,
A,
sure.
B, and then move on to C?
Yeah, sure.
Or do you want to talk
No,
about
no.
the neighborhood and then I'll...
No, go ahead, start.
So I think I probably have a very different take on this from the rest of you, so just bear with me. As I've stated in my earlier statements, I don't doubt that they have met finding A. I mean, they have provided analysis, and that the analysis has established the practical difficulties that are arising from the unique site condition and complying with the zoning regulations. With regards to findings B, I am overall satisfied with the financial assumptions, and I really do appreciate the applicant providing as much as information possible about theater income and expenses, given that it's not a typical kind of business one sees on a daily basis in front of us, and the information, especially with regards to independent movie theaters, are not akin to like a commercial movie theater. So,
But just to clarify, this can't be about the theater, it's about the
I'm talking about the
landlord.
I understand, but I'm
Okay.
referring to the cap rate and the
Okay.
information that was provided.
Okay.
So, just specifically to that.
Okay.
Right, yeah,
Right.
with regards.
I just want to make sure, because we can't move
Right.
into talking about the theater as the applicant.
No,
so
that's why I said,
landlord, right.
I'm totally satisfied. B, I'm also satisfied, especially now with the additional information that the applicant has provided and the difficulty in finding similar comparables. With regards to C, do you want me to talk about C,
go
or do you want to talk about
No,
C
no,
first?
go
and then
ahead.
I'll add on?
Go
Okay.
ahead.
So with regards to C, again, I have mentioned earlier about my position and the neighborhood character, and I want to refine my position further based on the statement provided by the opposition about the predominant residential character, and then and that the block is built up with commercial use located at street level. What is being compared is the placement of the use on a shallow 50-foot frontage along Cornelia, a residential building versus a theater above grade. A theater that will provide visual active frontage on Cornelia, and this would be similar to that is existing on Cornelia at street level, minus the pedestrian vehicular traffic that the community has expressed concerns with. Addition of at most 3 to 4 units on Cornelia located above grade will have negligible effect on the character of the street and will not be perceptible on a built-up street. This is a 50-foot frontage out of 896 foot on Cornelia Avenue, which is only about 5% of the total frontage that is built up. So based on my quick review of the Zola data, there are no soft sites on this block. So as I've evaluated based on how DCP evaluates soft site analysis. So will this set a precedent? I think it will not, because there aren't any vacant sites for similar kind of arguments to be made and for it to be built on. And most of the buildings, and if you're talking about the bulk of the theater on Cornelia, if that's an issue, I think majority of the buildings along Cornelia are 4 to 6 stories tall that are over 2.2 FAR, built way over the R6 permitted zoning. What is being proposed by the applicant is in scale with the abutting 5-story buildings, 50-foot high. The total proposed FAR on the zoning lot is 2.14 FAR based on Scheme 6, which is less than the ones that are built on Cornelia. By appropriately cladding the commercial mass that has the same height as the abutting buildings, and we often have always looked at the buildings immediately next to it, just keeping to that, the massing along Cornelia can be kept within the built context. And I believe this team is capable of doing it and will be obligated as per the LPC requirement. There is no difference between, again, so I just don't think there is much of an additional information. The additional information that has been provided by the applicant has just further reaffirmed my position on this, and with that, I'll just leave it.
But you didn't finish that sentence. By appropriately cladding the mass that has the same height.
The same height as the abutting building, the massing along Cornelia can be in keeping with the built context.
Okay.
And this is going to be very closely monitored by whatever conditions we put in, whatever LPC is going to require, we can be very, very particular and ensure that it would be as harmonious and consistent, regardless of what use comes there in future.
Anybody want to talk about character? I don't need to jump in.
Well, I just see the character argument a little bit differently than the vice chair does. I've been on Cornelia Street, and it seems to me that Cornelia Street can be characterized by either residential buildings or residential buildings with one floor of retail. And so while it may only be one site, like Vice Chair says, it is one site that would be totally different from everything else on the block if you were to make all of the floors theater. So I don't really see all theater floors as making the character finding on Cornelia.
I mean, we do have sometimes projects where, arguably the use is different than what's going on in the rest of the block, but we tread very carefully with those, and sometimes there's just no way that the use will be viable, the existing uses on the block will be viable because the site's too small. For instance, we often see in manufacturing districts, those little, like a 20 by 100 lot where you can't build a manufacturing use. So, and we sometimes look at it and say, what's going to be the impact of one residential use on the block, that kind of thing. But for me, in this case, what I'm mostly concerned about is not so much the theater use on the upper floors, it's that nothing is forever, but a building is forever. And then I'm concerned that at the time when the theater goes out of business, the board is then faced with some kind of really incompatible commercial use. And the commercial user coming to the board and saying, we can't make a go of this unless we have show windows on the street, or et cetera. And so all of a sudden, the future board is put in this uncomfortable position of helping a use be viable on Cornelia and then effectively shifting the character of that building into something that looks like a department store upstairs, right? Because you can easily make a good argument that we're moving in here, but unless we have show windows front and back, or unless we have entrances front and back or something, we're not going to be able to make a go of this totally obsolete building that was built for theater purposes. So I'm kind of, and LPC, to the extent, doesn't try to limit the ability of business to be a business. So it ends up adjusting to the needs of the business in order to make the building viable, because the whole idea is you don't want to cause sort of abandoned structures in historic districts. So from my perspective, I do see that if 4C is a viable use, a viable option, given the financials, that 4C is a much better project for everybody. In addition to which, the theaters lay out better, circulation is better in the theater, which is how we started here in the first place, where we're really concerned about crowds on the street and so on. And you know, 4D is kind of like lip service to this concept that you really want an active residential facade. It's just that it makes for I'm actually very surprised that 4D works out when you've got these skinny little units. So I think it's just a much better project. And it's more to follow. Anything else? Anybody? Okay.
Just with the environmental review, we've gotten word from the environmental consultant that they've conducted all the phase 2 subsurface testing, but they just need to prepare the report and develop a RAP for the project, and they'll be submitting that report to us in the first week of January.
Okay. So we're waiting for a RAP and?
And the phase 2 report. The actual subsurface testing has been done.
Okay.
Oh, and also just to put on the record that we did receive a number of letters early this morning from the community, and they're being processed by our staff. I just wanted that to be acknowledged.
Okay. Thank you.
Move on. Item number 21, 2016-4169 BZ, 230 Borum Street, Brooklyn.
Okay. Not sure, but I think the submission is incomplete. We still had open questions about the site's uniqueness. I know Commissioner Otley Brown wasn't convinced in the last hearing. Also, I had questions about the separate ownership since prior to 1961, where there's a statement in the statement of findings, but they didn't provide us with a copy of the deed.
So,
and also, sorry?
Sorry, go on. I just wanted to tell you about those two things.
Okay. And then also, we asked for them to discuss more the rezoning proposal for the North Brooklyn Innovation Area, the very small size of the units that are proposed, and the seeker questions that were open still about air quality in the Phase 1 update. I didn't find any submission on those two things.
The applicant said that they're going to submit a deed report. So they haven't done that yet, but they know that's an outstanding item.
Okay.
In regards to uniqueness, the applicant said that they explored that in the statement of facts, the revised statement of facts. And in comparison with other properties that were mentioned at the last hearing. And then in regards to the rezoning, the neighborhood study, it's not a rezoning yet. The DCP communicated with the applicant that they wanted DCP to communicate with us directly. So I did have a telephone conversation with the Brooklyn office, and I wrote a note in the, and then in regards to the seeker, they have, the applicant is aware that there are open items. They have to do, we need noise, for the noise study that they submitted, we need backup data and sound attenuation measures that they're proposing. And then we can send that to DEP. And then we need an updated Phase 1 for hazmat. And then for air quality, we need a response to DEP's September 21st review email comments. And then we need them to confirm that they're redoing their analysis for air quality based on the revised project. So those, but the applicant is aware of those open items.
Okay. So you spoke with city planning,
Yeah.
but then they're supposed to incorporate what you learned into their argument, otherwise,
Oh, okay.
right? So in other words, they're
Okay.
supposed to be making an explanation of why their proposal is not inconsistent with the current thinking about the neighborhood and that kind of thing. Otherwise, we'd be ignoring the fact that we know something is going to go on
Okay.
there.
I mean, I gave them the information, but they, if that's what you're requesting
Yeah,
for them
yeah.
to do, yeah.
Wasn't DCP going to make an announcement sometime around this time regarding what the next steps of the North Brooklyn rezoning and
Yeah,
timelines and deliverables?
don't have that information, but yes, I was told by
That-
Corenza Wood at DCP that in December there would be
Right.
more information
More information.
available.
Okay,
I don't have that information right now.
Okay,
Yeah,
so they
so-
haven't yet done that?
As far as I know,
Okay.
yeah.
But a timeline as opposed to certifying it, or
But they,
Right.
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
but they told me over the phone that even though it's in one of the industrial sub-districts that it's identified, it would still probably be mapped as residential eventually because the goal would be to retain the existing residential character, and this is adjacent to two different, to residential uses.
Okay. And, you know, it's a little tricky to rely on something that hasn't happened yet, but it could be just a general comment that in the materials that it's been the subject of a study, and that the study seems to be leaning towards making these areas this particular area residential.
It might also be
Well-
on I wonder if it's on the DCP website. I don't know if that helps in,
It's not in a sub-district that's identified as residential in the study, but they told me that these are just general boundaries and that residential would, once it's actually mapped, the residential uses would probably be retained. So this is not like hard and fast, the actual boundaries.
okay.
the
So this
details
is-
have not been.
Yeah.
Right, so this is more like a kind of a note that we might have in terms of another thing that gives us sort of confidence that it's not a neighborhood shift. So one way is simply that you're looking at the block and you see lots of residential buildings on the block, but then you note that apparently city planning is looking at, as opposed to saying that city planning is, you know, is going to do this thing. Right, okay. And then just another couple of comments. The project was revised to bring it down in scale and to bring down the scope of the waivers. And my only other issue was there's this new way of describing my detested building finish material, which is called synthetic stucco system, otherwise known as IFIS, or EFIS, or however you pronounce it. Neither the synthetic stucco system or the EFIS is okay. Something else, use another material. This is from my perspective, both at Landmarks and at the Board of Standards and Appeals, you're getting a special approval. You have to have your building contribute long-term to the quality of the neighborhood. And all you have to, if you ever Google those materials, you'll see like insurance companies raise rates on projects built with this because they're flammable or because the building rots from behind, or, you know, you don't have to research far. Anyway. There's also, there's an areaway and a stair to the cellar at the front of the building. I'm curious why they have that, because it kind of breaks up the sort of experience of the street by having that, even though, because it's sort of an areaway as if there were a stoop, but because the building isn't raised the way the neighbors are, the areaway doesn't.
You're talking about the area in the rear or in the front?
No, in the front. So you get to the cellar from the front. And so I don't know if that's like a required means of egress by using the cellar as a fire corridor, or whether that's just a simple convenience for them or whatever, but the areaway isn't being used in a way that's typical of stoop buildings where, you know, usually you have the stairs go down under the stoop, right? And that's very typical of this block. Also, I'm not 100% sure, but there's this 4-foot front wall setback. So if they could clarify whether the purpose of that is to align with the neighboring buildings, I think that's why. And if so, then the drawing should indicate the setback and to align with neighboring buildings. We actually had a letter of substantial compliance request last year where they didn't put that note on the drawings. Instead, they indicated 4 feet, or whatever the number was. It turns out that didn't align with the neighboring buildings, so they had to push the whole thing back, which required the need for a letter and ended up reducing the floor area in the building, because by pushing it back, they would have needed a rear yard waiver, so they cut the building short. So, anyway, but generally, I'm okay with this one. I don't know how you feel about financial.
They did revise the A finding to talk about uniqueness in the context of the M1, and so that's one of the things I had asked for. The other thing I had asked for under the A finding was to distinguish themselves from the 5 narrow, small conforming use lots located on this street as well, and it's probably very easy for them to add a sentence, and I might have even missed it, to be honest with you. But that was my question as for the uniqueness. As to the financials, I found that they addressed all of the issues that I had asked for, and I actually found this financial to be very thorough. So I only have one remaining question, and that is that they have calculated an industrial value through the sales approach at $880,000, and they also calculated the industrial value through the income approach, which is $458,000. And usually appraisers like to reconcile the different approaches of value, so there's very little variation between them, usually no more than like 20% between the different approaches of value. But here we see that one is double the other. So I would just like to know how they would reconcile such a large divergence between both values. However, either way you slice it, it still would not work. The industrial would not be feasible. So this is more of a question of, for my own information, if they could indulge me, I would appreciate it.
Anybody else?
Item number 22, 2016-4295 BC, 1074 East 24th Street, Brooklyn.
They requested an adjournment.
Item number 23, 2017-67 BC, 2714 Avenue War, Brooklyn.
Okay, well, with respect to this one, a lot has changed since the last submission. Where in the last submission, the increases were modest, and I actually held this up to equivalent projects as being the more respectful of its neighbors than most of the projects we see under this special permit. Well, let's just say that's not the case anymore. It has joined its comrades in asking for a lot. So, whereas in the earlier version there was a complying 30-foot rear yard, now the building is proposed to be extended at the first, second, and attic floors to leave a 24-foot rear yard. The proposed FAR went from 0.68 to 0.75, and when I do the math, I actually get 0.76 FAR. Lot coverage increased to 39%, and from no increase in the existing height of 29 foot 9 inches above grade, the proposed raises the peak of the building to 33 foot 9 inches above grade with dormered attic. We don't still have an attic floor plan, since if it is occupiable, it will count as floor area, and given that they made that increase, I assume there's floor area, plus there's dormers, why, unless they're just really decorative, why do that? We still need proof that the perimeter wall height of the neighbors is at least as high as proposed at 21 foot 11. I think that's how this permit works. If the existing building is at 21 foot 11, I don't think our permit allows a straight line extension unless the neighbors have higher perimeter wall heights. That's their, so they have an existing 21 foot 11. I believe that the special permit says you need to look at the neighbors to see whether you can even increase the degree of noncompliance. I don't see that it allows you to rely like we can on the side yards.
But how would that be reduced?
You just drop it down. There's a jog in your designs. It wouldn't be the first time you see that all over the place. There's a jog in the design of the street wall. It happens, it doesn't actually change anything. It's more decorative than anything else. I noted that also at the second floor, the only change to the plan was that the master bedroom went from a comfortable 15-foot wide by 16-foot deep to 21-foot wide by 16-foot deep. So now we need justification for the rear yard incursion at the second floor, where the rear yard study shows the house is surrounded by complying rear yards, and the previous submission showed that a complying yard at the second floor was sufficient. So I think to, kind of cut to the chase, the house should be set back at the second floor to provide more of a rear yard. We also need justification for the extension in the front yard relative to the block's character, and justification for the increase in height to 33 foot 9 inches. How does it compare to its neighbors in height? They need to give us streetscape data and a rendering for the context. None of that would have been necessary had we just been at the prior design. The lot coverage and FAR maps don't really support the position that the request is typical of the tax block or social block. But actually, I find that strange, given that other maps we've seen for the same area. And I wonder what the data source is. Like, they're not using the usual Pluto data maps that we usually see. All the FAR and lot coverage percentages should be shown on the map, as opposed to just them selecting the
Just the
view.
view. Mm-hmm.
Because the few they selected have much higher FARs and lot coverage than the proposed. So they're sort of doing themselves a disservice by looking for only the high ones. And sometimes we'll see, for instance, this one's asking for 39% lot coverage. If something has 37% lot coverage, that's very close. So by saying you're only going to look for ones that are 40%, you've done a disservice because you're trying to look at the basic character. You don't really measure 2% difference in lot coverage, for example. Ditto for the FAO. And then the BSA zoning calculation sheet has an error with
Yeah.
respect to the requested floor area ratio.
Existing building height, all of
Yeah,
those.
all of those things, okay. And make clear,
And open space ratio.
everything had an error, okay.
I just want to point out the open space ratio for, even though the building is proposing to now extend into the rear, somehow the open space ratio has increased. It should actually decrease. So the calculations are not consistent across all the documents, need to be reevaluated.
Okay. And then also, they need to make clear in the section that which floor joists are to remain, which to be removed, and those that will be new at the first and second floors. I mean, this is pretty much a straight line extension, so there's opposing walls that are being retained, but we need to make sure that now with all the changes, they're not just kind of gutting the interior and removing all the joists. Any other comments?
Did you mention that they need a new DOB objection regarding the rear yard
Oh,
waiver?
no, good point.
I'm just curious why this change happened, because they seem to have been satisfied with what they had initially proposed. And
It
it
would have been that your statement about how modest it was.
Yeah.
made them think twice.
Being too
Yeah.
modest,
Yeah.
maybe they
Yeah.
should have asked
If they
for
want this
more.
building done quickly, they should go back to the original.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
just been watching the other hearings.
Right.
Something.
Right, depends on what they're really looking for.
What?
Yeah, because now they're gonna have to spend all that time at DOB and all that
And
stuff.
since this applicant is new, would it make sense to give them some samples, especially with regards to how the FAR and lot coverage analysis is
Sure.
done, so that they know what we typically look for?
Yeah, I mean, the maps look right, but their data source, they may have gone to the trouble, actually, of going to the BIS website and looking at, the floor area ratios on
Right.
a dozen or so buildings and exhausted themselves, but they could just use the Pluto data and they'll get there faster. Yeah. Okay.
New cases, item number 1, 2017-208BZ, 700 Broadway, Manhattan.
Okay, this is a legalization that began operations in August of this year. We have proof of service to officials but I don't find proof of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors anywhere in any of the folders. However, Community Board 2 recommended approval. We also don't have DOI on this one. We do have approved fire alarm and sprinkler drawings, August sprinkler test report, photos of installed alarms and sprinklers, and affidavits from sprinkler and fire alarm installers. So if we could just get the proof of notice of hearing and DOI quickly, then we would have enough here. And I just want to make a note to BSA Council. They provided very good noise attenuation drawings that are in a separate file, so that should be combined with the main set. Okay? Anybody else on this one?
Item number 2, 2017-215BZ, 900 3rd Avenue, Manhattan. It's the legalization of PCE also.
Yep, they opened in May of this year. We also don't have proof of notice of hearing to officials or neighbors, same with the other one. But we also don't have proof of service to officials, but we do have a community board recommendation, so that obviously occurred. It's just we
You
don't
don't
have
have the
it.
initial one either?
We don't have either of them.
All right, I'll go look in the file.
The folders are just empty.
Okay.
What did the board recommend?
The community board recommended approval, but for a 5-year term, which is apparently their policy. So on all these PCEs, they recommend a 5-year term, so it's not like there's something strange about
Yeah.
this group, right? I just wanted to point out, in case Community Board 6 listens to this hearing, that they should be made aware that if a recipient of a special permit is not complying with the terms of the grant or is creating a nuisance, they can contact the BSA, and if necessary, a compliance hearing can be held. So they're feeling like they need to hear this every 5 years, because how else will they weigh in? They can weigh in at any time if the site is a nuisance. We did have one letter in favor, and we do in this case have DOI. So the statement of facts and plans all speak in the future tense, and this is a legalization about sprinkler, fire alarm systems, and acoustical measures. August 2017 photos show perhaps, it's hard to see exactly, fire alarm system in place, but no sprinklers and no hung acoustical ceilings. There are approved sprinkler modification application and plans that were not signed off. And so we need to hear what the status on all of that is. I believe this is the one that got a fire department, a letter stating that from the Department of Buildings to the fire department that they should be allowed to proceed, but we're still working out and hope to have shortly some kind of agreement with the fire department to allow these alarms to be installed prior to BSA approval. Anybody else? No? Okay.
Item number 3, 2017-311BZ, 211 East 8th Road, Queens. This is the Build It Back project.
Okay. Hi. So this is an application for the reconstruction of a storm-damaged home. It is located in an R3A Special Coastal Risk District. It's a 25 by 100 lot. It's a two-family, the proposed is a two-family modular home. This property is utilizing Article 6, Chapter 4, Special Regulations for Neighborhood Recovery Areas, which in some instances modify the underlying zoning regulations. The application is for 2 special permits. The first one is the 6492 special permit for modification of certain zoning regulations, and the second one is a 64A71 special permit for establishing nonconformance. The waivers requested under 6492. This property is a corner lot, and 64A354 requires that when one front yard has a depth of 15 feet, the other must have a depth of 10 feet. One proposed front yard is 16 feet, 2 inches along East 8th Road, and the other front yard is only 3 feet along Lenark Road, so they need relief for that. The other waiver requested under the 64A71 special permit is waiver of ZR Section 137-21 of the Special Coastal Risk District, which was just adopted by City Planning on June 21st, 2017. And the Special Coastal Risk District that was established here in Sub-Districts 1 and 3, which this one is in Sub-District 1, residential uses are limited to Use Group 1 single-family detached residences. This property historically contained a two-family home, but it was not a legal two-family. So the special permit, 64A71, allows the property owner to establish to reconstruct for two-family as long as they establish that provide documentation that a two-family existed on the home on October 28th, 2012. So the applicant provided several documents for this: flood insurance policies, Con Ed bill, tax returns, and proof of tenant letters to show that there was a two-family on that date. And this property also received the GCL 35 waiver from BSA on March 8th, 2016. And as part of the application, certain BSA rules of practice and procedure are being waived. And that's the summary.
Thank you. Any comments? This is the first time we're doing this,
Yes. The A71.
the special recognition of prior use. That's one reason I wanted Jella to go through it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's the first time.
Item number 4, 2017-312BZ, 18 Weber's Court, Brooklyn. Also build it back.
So this is a property located in Sheepshead Bay Courts in an R5 C22 zoning district with a special Sheepshead Bay district. So this is, although this is in Sheepshead Bay Courts, pursuant to a ZRD1 issued by DOB on September 16th, 2016, this is considered a street for zoning purposes, unlike other Sheepshead Bay Courts properties that don't have frontage on a recognized street. So because of that, they are requesting certain yard requirements. This is the reconstruction of a single-family, formerly semi-detached home. The proposed is detached. The home that was semi-detached with is being demolished. It is also utilizing Article 6, Chapter 4 Special Regulations for Neighborhood Recovery Areas. And this is a waterfront lot, so waterfront zoning district regulations apply here. So the waivers requested are the side yard. So pursuant to 23-461B, a 5-foot side yard is required here. So they have one proposed, the north side yard is 0.9 feet, which is 11 inches. And to the east, there is an existing zero lot line condition. So they need relief for that. They also need relief for their waterfront yard, which can be modified if it's a shallow lot up to 10 feet, but it's irregularly shaped lot, and the proposed varies from 3.9 feet to 24.2 feet, so they need relief for that waterfront yard. That's required. And then they also need, this is our first time doing a height waiver under 6492B, and the height required pursuant to 64-A36 is a 19-foot base height and a 25-foot total height measured from DFE, and the proposed total height is 25 feet 2 inches. They need relief for 2 inches.
That's an honest architect.
Yeah.
So even the structural element cannot extend beyond that. Everything has to be contained within
Yeah.
25 foot.
And this also received a GCL 36 on January 22nd, 2016.
Okay. Thank you.
And these will be heard first tomorrow?
Yeah.
These will be heard first tomorrow, so anybody listening will, yeah. This concludes the public review session for December 11th, 2017.
Thank you.
Mr. Master.